Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, Chris. Oh no.
Good
Your boy
evening.
Bill.
Good evening.
Oh, good evening. Good
Good
evening.
evening. Well done. Please pardon me. It's what do they call it? When you what's that thing when people that drink it lasts longer than usual.
Hangover.
It hangover from my daughter's birthday yesterday.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
So
You did not invite us, okay?
well,
Hi.
she
Wow.
didn't invite anybody but her friends either. So I just
You
I
just
just
sneak
get
in.
crashed. I just get crashed. She's a big woman now, so she didn't need any of us. Uh, and then you're welcome. I think we are on course for the last day. Lovely. I think you're the only one who didn't receive the recording from yesterday, and that's because I didn't see you, so I just followed the attendance yesterday to send the video. But you'll get it along with today's one, or if you send me an email of anything that is missing from your collection, then I'll send it. Today promises to be an exciting day. But you see, before we start, I want to give a broad overview of what we've done so far and add a layer of what the whole course is about. I like to tell people that when you have an idea of the big picture, it makes it easy to understand everything in between. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something like this. And up here, I'll put plan, do, check, and act. Okay? I think I've got a message. Yes, it'll activate automatically. Well, let me see if it's. I think it should have done so already. Yeah.
I'm yet to receive any notification regarding.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see that too. That's how I'm checking to see. I haven't got it either. Usually it's automatic. I never touch anything and it just starts. So I'm trying to see if it's something I can't see any button where I should press. So all the days it's been taken, it has always been automatic. And there's no place for me to click on anything anyway. Okay, hopefully it'll take the notes, but I can't see anywhere I can do it myself. Okay. So this is what the ISMS is all about. Remember, there is context from clause 4. But before the context even, you could say we have the initiation. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for, initiation, where the decision is made to go for ISO 27001. So decision. Who makes that decision? It can be the ISMS manager, the information security manager, the CISO. It all depends on the title. They figure out that ISO is the way to go. It could even come from the executives. Oh, I've heard about this ISO 27001. Shouldn't we be doing something about this? Yeah. Sorry, Noel, that's you. Yeah, so decision to go for a framework. Yeah, or determination of, then it happens there, and then you have the context. We're now looking at the standard. We buy the standard to have an understanding of it. By the standards, by the standard. Okay, I'm just adding some things, even things that are not necessary to for the point I'm trying to make. So I'm going to delete them. We have decided and we have looked through the standard. We're now trying to implement it. So the PDCA starts happening. We would then do the context, looking into the standard, say, oh, let's comply to the requirements of context of the establishment. Okay, so we're looking at that. We're doing scope. We're doing the projects approval, taking the business case, project approval. So business case approval. You're doing the risk assessment. So the business case approval, the objective comes in there. You're doing the risk assessment. After the risk assessment, you do your SOA. Okay. And in the do, operational controls. Documentation. So now you're implementing those things. From the risk assessment, you now selected controls. So you're now implementing the controls. Implementation of controls. And that comes from clause 8. Implementation of controls. You do change management or training because you're now implementing new controls. And the controls are going to move into business as usual. So you will do change management. All of that you're taking it from the standard. Okay. The statement of applicability is related to the Annex A. Yep. And after the training, the check, this is where we get involved. You monitor, you measure, you set KPIs, monitor, measure, set KPIs for all the controls, which one is effective, which one is not effective. So this is where the auditors, you start to get involved. You're going to, if this is the first time they're getting audited, you're going to look at everything to be sure they've done everything correctly. Okay, so you monitor KPIs, and then you do internal audit. You don't necessarily get involved in the monitoring. The operators do that. They check themselves. Am I doing it well? Is the control effective? Are we compliant to policy? That's where all the monitoring happens by themselves. And another layer of check is the internal audit. And the internal audit take everything to management. So management review happens after the internal audit. And of course, the corrective action, the continuous improvement happens here. After the audit, that's where you want to have corrective action plans. Okay, preventive action plans as well. And your continuous improvement. So this, in a nutshell, is what I want you to see. And that this audit, you're going to look at, will you be looking at? You'll be looking at documents. You'll be looking at, what else will you be looking at? You'll be observing operation. What else will you be looking at?
Interviews.
Interviewing
Be
people.
interviewing, yes, to confirm everything. You'll be doing inquiry and confirmation, third party, all those things we said about evidence gathering, all that's where you'll be doing it here. And you'll be looking backwards, of course, to what they've done. If it's taking them 9 months to get to here, you're looking over the 9 months if this is the first time. You're looking at their practices, yeah, the culture, records, yeah, and that's what you're doing. And if this is not the first time, if they've been audited before and it's a surveillance audit, which Madam Chinyere asked about yesterday, if it's not the first initial audit and you are certification auditors, external auditors, then of course you'll be looking at the internal audit that occurred before you got there. Plus anything else you want to do. And the same documents and records, observation of the operation, interviewing, inquiry, physical examination, practices, third party confirmation, you will do all of that as well. Okay, so I just wanted you to have a good understanding of what the audit is in the light of everything. And how would you know how to audit? How do you know what is major, minor? The risk appetite. And the risk appetite is not set by them, It is the context. Oh, they're in the oil and gas. Oh, this is the perception their stakeholders will have. Their stakeholders would not want to tolerate this kind of thing. Customers will not want their personal information to be sent anyhow. That's thing that what makes you know what is material is not only from the business, it's from the context. So you need to understand the context. And we said that idea of the risk appetite comes from the inherent risk, from the control risk, and from the detection risk. Okay, and you from the inherent risk is based on the organization. So auditors also do context establishment. Who are we talking about here? Oh, it's a school. Oh, if it's a school, safeguarding issues are a no-no. If it's a vulnerable school, this is what their risk appetite will be. If we're doing this for cost cutter, the risk will not be so high. So if we don't, yes, so the context is also important to auditors. Is this okay before we start today? I just wanted to give you this big picture because everything we're going to say and everything we've said is coming from here. Fantastic.
Excuse me. The
Yeah.
the risk appetite you just talked about. You're
Yes.
talking about that it comes from the context. Does
Yes.
your organization or the management now do they have a part to play in the risk appetite? I mean, sometimes it may be that there are some risks that are not regulatory. That would means you
Yes.
don't always have to, but the organization decided that okay, even though it might be a risk, it's something that we could make do. I don't know if that's what.
I totally understand you. We explained it, I think was day 2. But let me take you back again. It's a very good question. So they are involved in it. But so we talked about where it should start, your consideration. You should first consider the legal requirements. But if you don't find it there, then drop to regulation. If you don't find it in regulation, then your contractual obligations. If it's not there, then standards. If it's not there, your professional associations or the organizations where they've signed up to, industry codes, as an example. So the risk appetite starts from before they say, oh, there's no, as an example, if I'm driving on the motorway, this is the illustration I gave. What is the risk appetite? Is the national speed limit. You cannot decide how you will drive. But if you go to another country, even though it's 70 miles per hour in the UK, somewhere else it could be higher. What's the speed limit in Nigeria for those who are Nigerians?
For express, they call them I say freeway here. I think it's about 100 kilometers per hour.
100 kilometers per hour. Yeah. Do we have speed cameras or speed detectors?
No, we don't.
Manual, very manual. So the FRSC determines that by half. So, but here, speed cameras, the police, detectors, yeah, so many things, yes. So there, and some countries will have higher speed limits, some will have lower. So, So this is what we said. This is what you look at. You're looking at the context of the organization, which includes what are they governed by, what laws are they constrained by. You look at the size and complexity. You look at the potential impact on customers, employees, suppliers, shareholders. What are their service level agreements? They are not the ones that determine their SLAs. That is part of risk appetite. If they are constrained by data protection, if they must comply to data protection, how soon must they inform the supervisory authority after a breach occurs and they become aware? Can they decide to leave it for 1 week? Or let's not tell them yet. Or are they constrained to report it within a certain time? How soon should an entity report a data breach? As soon as they become aware of it. What's the timing?
Not exactly sure, depending on the industry, on the country as well.
GDPR. What does
Yeah.
GDPR say?
72 hours.
72 hours after becoming aware of a data breach, the organization the data controller or processor, especially the controller, must inform the supervisory authority. So you see, that's an SLA, that's a risk appetite. That's an idea of where risk appetites come from. They come from regulation. They come from law. They come from contractual obligations, SLAs. That's an example of risk appetite. Okay, good.
Excuse me, sir. Just a quick
Yes,
one.
yes,
Is
Chris.
it worth mentioning that when determining risk appetite and materiality has to be with respect to the scope of the ISMS? Because the organization might not want to scope out the entire suite of processing that they do or the entire suite of activities they're involved in. It might just be a subset of their processes that they want
Do you
to.
mind starting again? My volume was quite low. I didn't hear everything you said.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Isn't it worth mentioning that the materiality and risk appetite has to be with respect to the scope of the ISMS that they've earmarked that they want to do? Because an organization might do the entire shebang and decide just to have ISMS for only a subset of the entire thing that they do.
Yeah. So everything is tied to scope, not just the ISM scope, but the audit scope. Yeah. And the audit scope, remember, we said the engagement letter, what you're doing is implementing your audit plan. So everything that's put in your plan, before the plan is approved, the scope would have been considered. So everything must be within that audit plan. You can't approve a plan that is outside of your scope. If you do that, you're calling for trouble for yourself. So yes, it is tied to the scope, first to the scope of the organization, then to the ISMS scope. But even the audit scope can be smaller than the ISMS scope. So it must be contained in the audit plan. And the audit plan must be relevant. That relevance must show in the scope as well and in the engagement letter. Yeah?
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Fantastic. So we've done this. Now, what I want to show you is what we call the 4 levels of responsibility. And this is, there's a misstatement because we're talking about materiality. Oh, it's so material, it's so critical. Don't miss it. And we talked about the risk assessment that auditors must do to put measures in place to ensure that the audit is regarded as effective or successful. I don't like to use successful in audits, just that you have done your audit, you have met your objectives. It's a better way. Auditors don't like to speak in absolutes. Okay, so I don't like to talk about success of an audit. You delivered your audit, you met your objective, it's better. Okay, so auditors can make misstatements. We talked about detection risk. They might miss certain things that are so material that they shouldn't have missed. But we also said from day one that there are audit principles, there are best practices. Best practices are those things that are contained in, say, ISO 19011, 27006, 27007. Yeah, a framework for auditing, a guidance for auditing. Those are best practices. So if you follow best practice and you follow the principles of auditing and you maintain your skills, you keep your competence, and these things happen, we now have to look at levels of responsibility. Every audit is evaluated. So was the auditor negligent? No, there was no negligence. What does that mean? We'll look at that. Was it ordinary negligence? What should be the penalty for the auditor and for the audit team? Then there's gross negligence, and then there's collusion, intentional misconduct. Okay? So we'll look at all of those. No negligence is where the auditors cannot be held liable for mistakes, misstatements, if they have kept to professionalism, that principle of professionalism. They've done everything within the principles of auditing, confidentiality, due diligence. They've done everything. They've followed best practice, but still something was missed. Still, there was a misstatement. Okay? Auditors must still conduct their audits to avoid legal claims. It protects them from unnecessary lawsuits because they will say, did you conduct an opening meeting? Yes. Did you explain your methodology? Yes. How did you select your auditors? Look at the records, skills, what we've done before. And this happens because, oh, they have been fined. You didn't find that fraud. You didn't do this. It affected customers, stakeholders were affected. Didn't auditors look at these records? We've heard cases recently where organizations were shut down. They went into the administration and they were like, they have been concealing their records for the past 3 years. The next thing they'll ask is, who were the auditors for those times? Enron scandal. There was another big one again. There was the Enron scandal. I talked about one recently in a presentation I did. It was a bank, one of those banks. Can someone help me? One of those big banks. American bank.
Citibank.
No, not Citibank. This bank is gone now. What happened was they encouraged their employees to open accounts as if they were customers. So they opened millions of accounts. I could have thousands of accounts in that I would open, even though I'm a staff. And that's because they were setting them targets. You open account, you take out loans, and so they were just doing terrible malpractices. It was a governance issue, and it came from the top. They will give themselves loans. The loans will be bad. They'll open accounts, all because they wanted to meet targets. Okay, and auditors should have seen it, but the auditors were colluding with them. We'll get to collusion. Okay, so auditors they will always look at auditors. If the auditors have acted professionally, they followed best practices, but don't forget that auditors are not investigators. They're not inspectors. You should not be sniffing where you shouldn't sniff. You have an audit scope. You have an engagement letter. Stay within that. Don't, yeah? If you do what you should do, and it's later found that, oh, they were hiding something, you can only what you ask for. You remember, you will sample, you will interview, you look at documents. If they cook the books, if you can find that they've cooked it, fine. If you cannot, that's fine. Work based on what you find. Okay, so the auditor will then not have any liability, and that is called no negligence. They did all that they should have done, what any other auditor would have done. They followed best practice, they kept the principles of auditing, they were not influenced. Where there was problem, they escalated it, but still something was found. So that's no negligence. Then there is ordinary negligence. Ordinary negligence is a step above no negligence. In this case, there was some level of carelessness, maybe in attitude. You were supposed to come at 8, you came at 10. Within that window of time, something occurred, and you did it more than once. Yeah, you didn't follow all the steps that you should have. Your meeting, you didn't introduce everything. You didn't. Yeah, there were some things that you missed. Then that would be ordinary negligence, because the auditor would have failed to exercise reasonable care and diligence. Thank you, Loveday. It is exactly Wells Fargo. That is it. That's the one. Yeah, it was Wells Fargo. Okay, so ordinary negligence is where the auditor fails to exercise reasonable care and diligence. They were supposed to check, they were supposed to probe, they didn't probe. Something was showing, they didn't do that. Okay, professional skepticism, they didn't keep that. Someone was being too nice to them. Their judgment failed. Okay, and examples of ordinary negligence, if you get asked this in the exam, insufficient audit tests, insufficient sample size, errors in your audit statements, no peer review, quality assurance in audit. Okay, although not necessarily a breach of duty of care, it may lead to legal consequences. The auditor may be marked down in their evaluation, or they could even be held liable for damages or even face disciplinary. Okay, so that is ordinary negligence. And then the next level of responsibility is gross negligence from the description of the word or the phrase, you can tell that it is another step up. So we've seen no negligence, we've seen ordinary negligence, and then this is gross negligence. It could be an accumulation of ordinary negligence, but then it has become a habit. You did it so many times that it has now become material, that it will affect the perception to stakeholders, or it could affect the organization itself. Don't forget, auditing is a risk assurance function. We enable the organization. Okay, so gross negligence is when they fail to perform their duties with reasonable care and skill, and maybe miss major irregularities, not just financial, it could be anything, but in this case, the example is financial irregularities. And so it can lead to severe consequences, including loss of license for the organization, lawsuits, or closure. Like we've said, it has happened to other organizations. If the auditor should have found it out, don't forget auditing should happen at least once every year. So if there's been cases, if you catch it on time, then stakeholders, maybe shareholders, are not even knowledgeable of what's happening with the executives. Okay, so auditors have a big role to play, and that's why auditors must always report to the highest level in the organization anyway. So auditors must maintain high levels of integrity and professionalism to avoid gross negligence. The next one is intentional misconduct. It's not just that you need to be retrained, because in some of these ones, the mitigation may be a retraining. Oh, you're losing your touch. You go for a refresher. Go and get trained on certain aspects, or even train ISO all over again. That's why we maintain our continuous professional education to stay on top of our game. Any of the others can be mitigated with retraining, but collusion and intentional misconduct is not just about not knowing something. It's intentionally going against what you know, like fraud. Okay, so it is called collusion, intentional misconduct. Auditor collusion happens when an auditor helps an organization to hide or manipulate records, breach ethical rules, and breach trust. And as such, it can result in disciplinary, even prosecution and jail time. Okay, they can even be expelled from their profession. That's why sometimes when I hear about lawyers and think in certain countries, you see how judges in some countries behave, and it's as if they cannot be expelled from the profession. It shouldn't be. Every profession must have their code of ethics, their code of conduct. And if there's any proven case, I think the CJN, recently appointed CJN of Nigeria, is not allowed entry into the US. Why? Because of the elections in one state, Imo State. Yeah, these are the kinds of things. But she still has the garb, and they've just made her the Chief Justice of Nigeria. It shouldn't be. Auditors are held to a very high standard, and I think judges and lawyers should too. In the medical profession, they're held to the Hippocratic Oath as well. So all these things matter. Then another special category is fraud. It is also intentional. It is deeper than collusion. It can even be the auditor acting by themselves. Remember, in collusion, they're acting in party with the organization. But fraud, they can do it all by themselves. Okay? It carries the same punishment as collusion, and sometimes even worse than that. So this is where we record our audit findings. Is a template for audit findings and evidence, just a template. Here, related to what we did in terms of identifying key areas, you could have something like this. This is a high-level view. Okay, don't forget, this should work hand in hand with your audit plan. But first, you want to know what your scope is. What areas are we going to audit? Oh, we're going to audit IT, HR, finance, operations, and on and on. And the objective, why are we auditing them? So this is a high-level view before you break it down into an audit plan. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Very good. So you need a high-level plan. It is related to your identification of key areas, and it is related to your audit plan and to your audit test plan. So they go hand in hand. So this is an example list of audit criteria or clauses that you want to use to assess an organization against ISO 27001 requirements. You can say, hey, we're auditing clause 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and also the annex. Okay. And in the annex, this is taken from a real organization because they were doing a transition. They were being audited against Annex A in 27001 2013 and Annex A 27001 2022 version. Okay, so that's the audit criteria. Data analysis is basically saying, oh, right, we've collected information. Let's analyze it. Let's present it. IT, they had one finding. HR, so as an example of what data analysis is. When you've collected your findings, you then do an analysis. Last year, IT had 5 findings. This year, it's 2. How do you want to present it? HR, yeah? Basically just analyzing your findings. That's what data analysis is here. It's basically examining and interpreting audit-related data to derive meaningful insights, identify trends, assess compliance, and make informed decisions. So management could say, right, IT last year was bad, this year is better. Or, oh, we're suffering and so and so. It will allow them to make decisions. Oh, we need to employ someone to support the IT manager. We need to employ someone. Oh, we need to take this person, move this person here. We need the IT manager to help HR because they seem to know this thing. It helps them make informed decision. Are we good so far with data analysis? So we'll take an example area to analyze, and that is incident response. These are touch points you want to analyze. You will gather incident data. You will validate the data. Data validation is always important because you want to validate or verify the accuracy of what you've received. That step is very important. It's not emphasized in ISO courses. If you do a course like Certified Information Security Auditor, they emphasize on verification or validation of information you collect. You must always validate it to be sure it is accurate, to be sure it is correct, and stuff. Then you want to organize the data, classify the data as an example, then look at the analysis. The trend, sorry. Analyze the trend. Do a root cause analysis. This root cause analysis is different from the root cause analysis that is done in corrective action. Okay. You then want to look at their response, assess their incident response, the impact assessment, all of these things. It could be documentation, it could be interview, it could be looking at the exercise that they did. The same way you do fire drills, you could do the same for incident response. How will we respond if there's an incident? That incident could even be fire. Okay, so you do the response assessment, their documentation. Have they done any drill? Are they required to do any drill? How did the drill go? Is someone saying something? Olan is in today. Okay, so all of these touch points might have documentation or records. You also want to look at the performance metrics. We've already talked about that. When we looked at when we started tonight, I said let's have an overview. And in our check, the first thing we saw was metrics. So in doing incident management or incident response, like we'll do for everything else, there will always be metrics to look at before auditing. Okay. So this is just an example data analysis for incident data.
Excuse me, sir. Are you using
Yes.
incident response interchangeably with incident data in terms of the terminology?
Incident data is the data that comes out of everything regarding incidents. So we're not using it interchangeably. Incident data is the data out of the incident. So as an example, how many breaches? That's incident data. But the incident response is what you're doing, is a process for responding. So incident data
Okay.
is the breaches, maybe malware is 5, uh, phishing is 2. That's incident data. Yeah.
Can you go back to the slide before this one? I just want to. So we're talking. So we're talking about data analysis, which
Mm.
is I'm trying to reconnect the link between data analysis and incident.
No, data analysis first is you analyzing data you get. Oh, we've got this finding, we've done this audit. We are now analyzing it. What did remember I tied it to this in IT? When we audited IT incident response could be there. What else can be there? Cybersecurity risk and so many things. We're auditing the IT department. What did we get out of that? You now want to analyze it and maybe even present it like a bar chart. You could do the same for everything. Say IT last year was so and so. Data analysis is what you want to present out of the what do you make of the information you've got? What do you make of you've got information, so what? So you're answering the question, you're analyzing the data.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah. You're interpreting the data. What's the deriving meaningful insights, identifying trends, you're analyzing the information, analyzing the data. Oh, how many findings did you have? That's some kind of analysis. We found 50, there were 50 findings. 2 of them were major. All those counts. That's data analysis. And if you've got data analysts or people who know how to analyze data in your team, they can present it in Excel. They can. I did it some days ago with someone who had done the data, but I wanted insights. I wanted to see something. I wanted to present it. So I said, look at my lame data analysis. I've written it down. You are an Excel expert. Can you bring it out in Excel? And he did it. What he did was he even created a map and put the numbers. And that's the data analysis. 75 here, 50 there, 20 there. That's data analysis. Then if executives don't want to read too much write-ups, the map shows everything. The histogram, the bar chart shows them what they want to see because you've analyzed the data. And if they want to drill into it, they can do so. Okay, so we can do it for incident data, analyze that aspect. We've audited incident response. What do we make out of it? That's just what this is about. Okay, in analyzing incident data, you might want to review access control logs because there you can find non-conformities. And what can we find? Oh, people were logging in when they were not supposed to, beyond opening times. When the business closes at 5, there are more logins after 5. Who is doing that? You might want to show people. That's why you say you can verify whether there were irregular access patterns. We're analyzing the data as auditors. What did we find? Let's put the number down. Let's present it to someone. Where else can we analyze? We can analyze access log collection. Okay, so this is going deep into incidents, incident response. We can look at access log data, the logs that come from systems, that comes from applications, from devices. So, is that good, Chris?
Yes, yes, that is fine.
Fantastic. Okay, and it makes reading a lot easier. Look at this one. It says you want to ensure that you have access to logs that cover the audit scope, of course. It includes critical systems, materiality, and even sensitive data repositories. Same thing, materiality. And so if management is more concerned about critical systems, sensitive data, you will show that clearly. This is what hit critical systems. This is what potentially can hit sensitive data. And they can see that clearly. You can even put them in, you can color code them, make the critical systems red, make sensitive data amber. Yeah, where we are. So you can do so many, that's the data analysis. And so we're just doing it for incident, but you can do it for so many other aspects. We talked about data validation. We talked about data organization. So I'm not going to repeat myself. You validate every data that's collected, that's received, must be validated very importantly. And then you can organize them. Yeah, it can be according to source system, application, it could be user accounts, it could be time, it could be dates. Yeah, it could be date of acquisition, status, active, inactive, can be so many things. You can organize it the way you want. There's no hard and fast rule. You also might want to examine the audit trails within the logs. Very important. This is another touch point in incident management. What you can do in your own time is take a clause and follow this. What are the touch points? And if you want, we can do it beyond the class. They say, Roy, I've taken this clause. You can take a technical clause, you can take a strategic clause and break it down. This is what I think will be the touch points for this clause. So basically, this is what an auditor has broken incident to be. I want to look at data classification. I want to look at communication. I want to look at follow-up and corrective actions. You can do that same thing for another, because sometimes people look at ISO and they say, oh, I'm just going to look at clause 4 to 10, and they think it's just 7 clauses. So we can, within one clause, there can be several touch points like this. And then you have the annex as well. And that's what marks one auditor different from another. While someone is just content with seeing that something exists, another will be very, very deliberate and detailed in their assessment. Okay. So there's data validation, data organization. You also want to look at audit trail. Who did what and when did they do it? What is the policy? What does the policy say? Policy is also tied to legal requirements, contract obligations. So the policy may have all of the rules that are supposed to be followed. You will now say, right, who accessed files? Are they supposed to have access to it? Are they in the list of those who have those rights? When did they do it? Yeah, so you're looking at the rules and you're looking at the actions and trying to match that to policy. Who should be able to read? Who should be able to modify? Who should be able to delete? Did they stay within their rights? Did they take more rights than they should? Has somebody moved from this business area? Did they go with their privileges? So these are just some things you can look at. That's another topic. Yeah. So user activity basically. Who did what? Look for instances of unauthorized or inappropriate access. Anything that violates policy. Look at privileges. Do they respect the principles of least privilege, or do they take more rights than they should? And then, of course, anomaly detection. For checks that are technical, remember we've talked about document review, we've talked about interviewing, but there are also technical checks that can happen. Who wants to tell me how auditors, especially certification auditors, how can they do technical checks? What are the things you remember about how they should carry technical checks out? Anyone? How should auditors carry out technical reviews?
By observation.
How? By observation, would you care to add a little bit to what you just said?
Well, see how the technical controls are actually performing and what is churning out of it, what goes into it, what comes out of it. Observe it in real time.
Yeah. Okay. So you observe it in real time, and what buttons would you press? What if it's a technology you don't know?
Oh, then, well, that's why you shadow you need to understand what the control does, and then shadow the individuals who actually manage those controls.
Must you always shadow them? Can't you just do it yourself? What if they're not available?
Roy,
Yes.
I think it's subject experts could also be used in some technical areas that if you don't have the knowledge for those technical, I think you can use the subject experts to get some of those places.
Yes, you can. But what if you have the knowledge? Must you use the subject matter experts?
I don't think you're meant to carry out yourself.
Okay. Why? And do you mind adding a little bit onto your answer?
Because you taught us that they're meant to carry out the test you're just meant to.
Fantastic. Auditors must never perform the operation themselves to find evidence. Like Chris said, you should shadow the operators in doing that. And that is because you must never contaminate evidence. You must never perform anything, no matter what it is, even if you have the skills, even if you know the technology. They must do it and produce. Oh, they are making a claim, and you want, if it's relevant to the audit and it's part of the test plan that's been approved and agreed in the opening meeting, and you're doing it now, you're asking them to do it while you're there, to maybe compare it to what they produced before. Oh, I thought you said this does so and so. I thought you said so and so person has these privileges. Produce the output. Let me look at it. Even if you know how to send a command to do it, don't do it. The operator must do it in your presence. Okay, so that check must be relevant. It must have been agreed to, must be approved, and now you're asking them to do it. It's not a surprise. Oh, but why should I do it? No, we discussed it at the opening meeting. Look at it here. It's in our test plan. It's approved. So please do it now. Okay.
Is that professional skepticism?
No, professional skepticism is not taking what they tell you on face value. If they are being too nice to you, professional skepticism is always doubting their intentions. That's professional skepticism. Rely on your own skills, your own knowledge, and your own competence to find information. So if they are being too nice, be doubtful. If they are being antagonistic, be doubtful. Okay, that's professional skepticism. Good. Okay, so these are just touch points we mentioned before. He's just breaking all of those touch points into pages. So we're not going to read this. Yeah, so these are just all the touch points, incident response all the way through. Now, audit reporting and communication. Is it part of the touch points? Let me see. Okay, no, it's not part of the touch point. This is the very good. Should we take a break and then do audit reporting and communication? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So 15 minutes. See you back at 8:10. Okay. I'll pause the recording. Someone should please remind me in case I forget. Take care. I didn't see this.
No, it didn't
Usually it's
start.
no, it didn't at all today. I don't know why. Because it does it automatically. I've never had to do anything. So anyway,
Thank you.
yeah.
That's fine.
Okay. Sorry about that. So to finish up, we're going to look at audit reporting and communication. It's not so difficult to see how it relates to something we've looked at before, the communication plan. We also did a bit of this in the homework when we looked at who is responsible for documentation, for professional development, for follow-up, and of course, reporting. So we've already done this already in parts. But just to emphasize the point, we are showing you how to write your audit findings and reports. You don't have to write long essays. If your template is well structured in fields where it says name, interview, test, procedure, documentation. So you just write it in brief. Yeah, depending on how you design your template, you don't have to write long essays. As you can see, it says to write using clear and concise language. Avoid technical jargon. Avoid unnecessary complexity. Provide sufficient detail to support each finding, including facts, evidence, and observations. Be objective and impartial. Make sure your finding that you put on your template, your work papers, is a reflection of work that you actually did. Yeah, it's a view of your integrity and your professionalism. Use a consistent format and style by having work papers that have been approved. This is our standard, and you will show it in the opening meeting. It ensures that it is readable and that your presentation is coherent as well. So this is what our finding record of template sheet looks like. I've shown it before. We have the first section that basically says what the audit date is, who the auditors are, what the scope of the audit is, and of course, what control you're auditing. So for every finding, you have this box if you want to, or you can just do one document that captures every finding. But in our case, we do this for every page, we have this. Then you have the finding number, you have the description of the finding in details. You have the risk level, very good, whether it's high, medium, low. This can be for an internal audit. For an external audit, you say if it's a major finding, minor finding, observation, and all that. Then you describe the evidence that you've collected to support the finding. So don't mix issues. The box above the risk level is the description of the finding, and then below it is the description of the evidence to support your finding. Okay, it's always very good if you can support what you put as part of finding, if you can support it with some kind of evidence, and then your recommendations down. Then the recommended action below that, who the responsible party is for carrying out that action, someone you can call when you're doing your follow-up to see that that action has been implemented. Okay, good. So a template is a good way to go. And then the finding template is different from the report structure. The report is a collection of the different findings, while the finding template is for one clause or one control. The report is an accumulation, a collection of all the findings. As you can see, point number 5, you are presenting your findings. Okay, this is a report, and you can support your report with your finding sheets if you want. You don't have to do it this way. So your audit findings could also be what we said about data analysis. It could just be a bar chart, a pie chart, or whatever to show. It could even be a table. For those who don't like or don't know how to use Excel, you can just do a table. It's still fine. Okay, just make sure you understand what your stakeholders prefer. Okay, so we have a title page, we have a table of contents, you have an executive summary, you have an introduction, your audit findings, the analysis and discussion below that. Okay, you're analyzing the significance of the findings in relation to the organization's objectives, risk appetite, and controls. Okay, then the conclusions, and then of course your recommendations. Then a section for management's response. That's where you're getting their commitment. They're going to provide resources. They're going to close it within 3 months, within 6 months, or anything. Okay. This is your communication plan for communicating the audit results. You have the analysis of your audience, basically your stakeholders, your interested parties. You have a list. So for every row, you might have one row per interested party. Customize the communication to the needs and preferences of the stakeholders. Some might want it by email, some might just want the finding sheet, some might want the report, some whatever is agreed, you will tailor the communication to it. Make sure you present your audit findings in a clear, concise, and structured manner. Highlight the most significant findings and their implications because you are a risk assurance function. This is very, very important. Make sure you highlight the key messages. Provide context. Present the audit findings objectively, the recommended actions. Make sure your communication is timely. If you've told them they will get it within a week, give it to them in a week. If it's going to stay longer than a week, say maybe there's some administration, there's some technology problems, communicate to them that it's going to delay beyond when you promised them. Okay. And ensure that there's a feedback mechanism as well. Okay, any questions? Nope. That's good. Now, what's the difference between Olan, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to ask a question that
Go ahead.
if there is something that you found that was not proper, like before you raise your findings, is it something you communicate with them or you just put everything together and give it
It depends on the risk to the client and the perception stakeholders around. It might be so critical material that even though they can fix it, you might need to record it. It all depends. If they can fix it, all the better. But it all depends on what the materiality is. If it's sensitive data that has been exposed, and this is not just once, and based on your finding, it's a habit or it's something it's negligent, but they will fix it, but you still record it and say they did it. Yeah, but it all depends. That's why we always talk about auditors' professional judgment. What do you think this, in your opinion, a lot of I don't want to call it trust. There's there's reliability on auditors' judgment to some extent because they have been selected based on their skill, based on their experience, and based on their competence. So we expect them to have a measure of professional judgment, professionalism, and things like that. Don't forget, before they are certified, they would have been tested, they would have been trained, there would have been references. So all of these things add up to the reason why we expect some level of professionalism when they're doing their job.
So if they fix it before you put your documentation together, your report, do you still keep it for record purpose that this was
No,
found
you
at
don't have
this?
to. It all depends. If it's something minor, just it's not a serious issue, you don't have to. You
Okay.
don't have to record it. That's why I'm saying it's down to judgment. What do you think about this situation? Do you keep it because you expect it's likely that they will do something like that again, and you want the next auditor, which may not be you coming next year, to keep an eye on that? Then you record it. But if it's not something serious, you don't have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
So,
also,
yeah. Mm.
if it's a recurring issue, it might still be noteworthy to note it, just so, like you said, the next person that is coming should be able to know that, okay, this thing is like someone is becoming like a recurring thing, which could
Yep.
lead to, you know,
Yep.
if it's
Even for
recurring,
yourself, even if
yeah,
you are the one coming and you see it's a recurring, you can put it down so that next time, because things that are recurring become more serious than they were before. So anything that's repeating becomes more serious. It's the same thing. I've been using driving as example. If you keep doing something, if you if you're caught say speeding, Typically, the first time they tell you to go on a course, they don't fine you immediately, depending on the gravity of that. If the speed is not a lot above the speed limit, they might tell you to go on a speed awareness course. Okay, but if you do it again, they'll check the records. Oh, this person has done it before. 3 points. Yeah, so it's the same thing. Does that make sense now? Okay. The question I was going to ask is, what's the difference between evidence-based auditing and risk-based auditing? How do they relate? How are they different? How can we use each and how can we use both? Evidence-based approach and risk-based approach. Yes, Chris.
Oga, you tell me say I won't talk now.
Hey, you're green. You're showing green.
Okay,
I'm
so
observing. I'm auditing you guys.
okay. So risk-based approach is to identify the key risk areas of an organization based on the context of the organization. So earlier we talked about the criteria of your auditing, where you
Yep.
narrow down and follow with the high risk areas depending on the industry that the organization is based.
Yep.
So risk-based approach auditing is to follow those key risk areas based on the context of the organization.
Yep.
However, evidence-based approach is based on the samples that you have taken. As such, getting it right is getting the right size of sample
Yep.
so that the evidence that you're using will be a true representation of the auditing that you're doing.
Yep. Very good. Very, very good. So risk-based auditing, you are looking to prioritize, but you can use it in combination with evidence-based because with evidence-based auditing as an example, let me do this. You can say clause. I'm making it just for illustration purposes. It can be more detailed than this. Clause evidence. So you could say for clause 4 point, say clause 4.1, which is context of the organization. Yeah. You will say, oh, we will need to see their SWOT. We want to see their PESTEL. We want to see their strategic objectives. We want to see their policy. I'm just saying, we want to see their, yeah, so for every clause, you have said what evidence you're going to look. That is evidence-based approach. And it doesn't necessarily need to follow any order, just based on the evidence that you have agreed to look for and find per clause. While risk-based auditing, you're saying which area is important. Oh, it's the board, it's top executives, it's IT. That's risk-based auditing. But you see, if you have already said what you are going to look for per clause, say we'll do this for 4.2, we do for 4.3, you would then to work together or to integrate risk-based auditing into this, you can then say the order here or the criticality. This will be the 5th point. This will be the 4th. Yeah. So you can do risk-based auditing and evidence-based auditing. You can do them together. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you, so your identification of key areas, you can use that and put a column and say these are the evidence I want to find. So it's more, it um, it's easier if you use that identification of key areas and you put the evidence you want to look for than going it this way. But you can also go this way. So it's just a matter of style. But just the difference is evidence-based auditing is what is the best audit, what is the best evidence to look for. Oh, I'm going to interview as well. So it is down to the best evidence that will make the audit effective. That is evidence-based auditing. What is that evidence that we can verify? Yeah, that will make this audit effective. And then risk-based auditing, in which area is more critical to look at? Good, good. The lead auditor is responsible for the presentation and the contents of the audit report. Responsible, so it's the lead auditor's idea about the audit, their conclusion, what they think the audit has provided, has shown, that goes into the audit report. Yeah, are we going to say they have passed the audit, or are we going to say that they have failed? They don't necessarily are the report writer, but they are responsible for the content. Okay. You prepare the audit reports summarizing all the parts that you have audited and evaluated. It should include your audit approach, the scope, the areas you've audited, the recommendations for improvement. We've already shown the structure of the audit report. So basically, make sure you have a structure. It must be approved. It doesn't have to be like this. This is an example audit report structure. The key thing is it has the finding, it has the analysis and discussion, it has the conclusion, whether they pass or they fail, and it has the recommendation. You can also argue that management response is also important. So as long as these key areas are covered, you don't need a table of content. Some audit reports, I don't see a table. The table of content is just for presentation. So it's not a key aspect of a report. The key aspect is those areas that talk about the audit. What's the audit finding? What's the analysis of it? What's the conclusion? What are the recommendations? And what is the response? Okay. So you prepare the audit report, you submit it to the relevant stakeholders, tying it back to the communication plan. Remember, the communication plan had already identified the stakeholders, the objective of the report, and then those key findings, and everything else we put in the audit report. Okay, so you are leading an audit team tasked with conducting an ISMS audit for a large global financial institution. After completing the field work, you need to communicate the audit results to various stakeholders, executive management team, the IT department, and the board of directors. Describe the approach you would take to communicate the findings effectively to each stakeholder group. So what's the approach you would take to communicate to each group? And how would you ensure that they understand the implications and that they are prepared to take action to address identified deficiencies? Do you want us to split into two groups, or will one group be enough? I think one group is fine. Okay? And two people will present when you come back. So be ready to assign presenters, two presenters for the answers. I think we can do this in 15 minutes, should be more than that. Okay? So there we go. See you guys. Okay. Welcome, everyone. So did you have the time to elect presenters?
We did. We did. Was it
Okay.
one group? Was it
Yeah, it
one
was
group?
just one group.
We did.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay,
So really,
I'm presenting for the team, and
Okay.
following the question, but this is what we came up with as a team. And the first thing we said was that we need to, we've identified our stakeholders, and we know that our stakeholders fall into different groups. So the first thing we need to do is to prepare a comprehensive audit report that will include an executive summary that will clearly outline the scope of the audit, our key findings, our recommendations. Would also include in that report the detailed findings, whereby each of the deficiencies I've identified is giving detailed explanation. There's an overview. Um, we are including the severity, the root cause, and the potential impact of that deficiency that we've identified. We are also providing recommendations in our audit report by offering practical suggestions that will address these deficiencies. We'll also include evidence that will support our findings. So we also stated that in categorizing our stakeholders, we would have used the rating matrix to group
Okay.
them. Yes. And then once we've done that, we'll now schedule meetings with these key stakeholders, knowing that there are going to be several meetings because we would have grouped these stakeholders into, different groups or categorize them into different groups, basically. So we are inviting the relevant parties to these meetings. We are ensuring that we set a clear agenda. We are also preparing our presentation slides that should be, that would have, the detailed reports, and that would include charts and whatever data that we are including or diagrams in that presentation slides. We would now go on to deliver our presentation and ensure that we are clear and concise in our delivery. We've highlighted the key findings, which we are presenting also in a clear and easy to understand manner. We are explaining the implications of the deficiencies we've identified. And these implications would include financial implications, reputational implications, or legal risks, attached to these deficiencies. Would also provide recommendations to these groups of stakeholders. Would also ask them questions or encourage them to ask questions so that we can clarify and explain further, you know. Um, Also, our attitude in this should be that we are listening to them actively, we are paying close attention to their concerns and questions. We're providing them clear answers, and we are avoiding technical jargons and ambiguities. We are also being empathetic in the way we deliver our presentation to them. And then our focus, or one of the key objectives of these meetings, is to also agree on next steps. And that would also include developing an action plan, assigning responsibilities, so clearly identifying who is responsible for what, also setting deadlines.
Very good.
Yeah, we'll follow up basically and monitor progress, and
That's agreed.
so give, yeah, exactly. So this is, and I believe other members can also chip in any way that I may have missed out anything. So this is what
Okay.
we came up with in our meeting, in our group rather.
Very good. Very good attempt. Is there anyone who wants to add anything to it?
So, good way to ensure that there are no miscommunication and that the stakeholders understand the points that were raised or the abnormality is idea of adding the response from these people, because
Management.
when they respond to whatever observation you have, it shows that they understand whatever you put forward. So the issue of maybe later not saying, I'm not sure I understand what you wrote would not be there, because their response shows that they understand whatever observation you brought up. So it's very good also to include that in the report.
Very good. Very good.
And the meeting will be minuted as well anyway. It's evident. Yes. And then as Chris pointed out in the discussion, there shouldn't really be a lot of surprises or any really, because we've carried them along.
Yeah. That's very crucial. Very, very important. Okay, so when it says to describe the approach you would take to communicate the audit findings effectively to each stakeholder group, it means you have a plan. What plan would you use to communicate the audit report, audit findings? A communication plan. So you have a communication plan. In answering this, you say, we would have a communication plan, and the reason for that, also justification for the communication plan, to ensure that every stakeholder group is adequately, effectively, and properly identified. Their needs and expectations will also be met. The way they want to be communicated to. If somebody wants you to call them or present to them or to send an email or want a paper document, you are fulfilling that need the way they want to communicate. How would you ensure that they understand the implications and are prepared to take appropriate action to address identified efficiencies? You would have carried them along. Start all the way from the start, where you had an opening meeting and you explained your approach. Like you said, there will be no surprises. So you would have explained everything at the opening meeting. You will have carried them along. And then here now, you are recalling what you explained to them from the start. And of course, you're taking minutes of the meeting. Okay. And everything else you mentioned. If you give them an opportunity to ask you questions, when they speak, you ensure that you've understood what they're saying. You are taking down notes. You're telling them why you're taking down notes as well. Very well done, everyone. Okay. Don't take these application questions for granted. These are the ways questions will be asked you. How would you communicate audit findings if you're applying for audit jobs? Okay. Don't just give brief answers. Don't make your answers too long, but make sure the main points in that answer is covered. You will have a communication plan. This is why. You will identify stakeholders. This is why you'll identify them. And this is how you communicate. So just make sure your points are well organized and expressed adequately. And then we talked about management response, telling them about the corrective actions, when you would do the follow-up, the implications of the follow-up being done when they agree. Okay, you identify the non-conformities, assess the significance based on the risk to them, the materiality. The significance of the non-conformity is based on materiality. What might be significant in this audit may have not been significant at your previous audit. It all depends on the context. Okay, the inherent risk. Okay, so the risk appetite as well. So I assess the significance of non-conformities and then develop corrective action plans. Corrective action plans are basically developed to or established to address non-conformities that you would have found in an audit, and it identifies a responsible party to carry out an action at a point in time to eliminate the root cause of the non-conformity. Okay, so it is mitigating discrepancies by identifying the root cause of those non-conformities and then ensuring that they don't happen again. They are critical to maintain ISMS compliance or conformity. The organization will develop a corrective action plan outlining the steps, the resources, the timelines, and of course, the responsible party. When the follow-up is done, if you're an external auditor, you would rely on the internal auditor to do the follow-up. You can rely on the internal auditor to do the follow-up, and then you're only communicating with the internal auditor to see that the corrective actions have been done. Yeah. So you'll identify root causes of the issue. These are the steps. Identify the root causes. The root cause will then be analyzed because there could be potential root causes, more than one root cause, potentially. Make sure the right root cause is identified. That is down to professional judgment. Okay. You conduct a thorough investigation analysis and identify the actual root cause. Then you can ask the organization to develop the action plan. And as an auditor, you will assess that action plan to see that it will address the root cause that has been identified. Okay? Don't just take any root cause. Oh, they've done a root cause. It must be addressing the non-conformity, and it must be eliminating what would have caused that non-conformity. Set timelines, monitor progress as agreed, and of course, verify that the corrective action has been implemented. Okay. These are example root cause analysis. We've got the 5 whys. We've got the fishbone or Ishikawa diagram. You've got the fault tree analysis, FTA. You've got the FMEA, failure mode and effect analysis. And for quality and continuous improvement, there's this Japanese concept of the Kaizen. It's also a way of implementing continuous improvement. Okay, so when we talked about the implementation of the ISMS, the PDCA, this root cause analysis, this Kaizen can also be used in the ACT part. Or, so it means after the internal audit, they can do the Kaizen, but also it can be used after an external audit when they're doing corrective actions. Remember, in the Act, we've got corrective actions. Those corrective actions can be for the internal audit. They can also be used for external audit. The 5 why, just remember how, if you've watched some videos of children asking the why question on and on and on, that's the same thing. Ask the why question until you get to the bottom or to the root cause of a problem, of a non-conformity. Why here? Why is it so? Why did they do it? Why did you do it? Until you get to root cause. Okay, it's a very simple root cause analysis method. Then you've got the fishbone diagram, also known as the cause and effect. Okay, it's also called the Ishikawa. It helps identify causes of a problem, and it actually looks like a fishbone. You've got the spine line, and you've got the rib kind of lines up and down. Or the effect is the head of the fish, and then the cause, different cause from different parts of the business. So if, for example, if you say, we are receiving too many spam emails, that is the effect. The cause could be a lack of training, a lack of proper setting. So the setting may be too loose, allowing too many spam emails through the filter. It could be management did not develop a policy, anti-spam policy. It could be the IT manager not aware that those things are happening. So you've got several causes and you've got the effect at the end until you get down to why that thing is happening. Then there's the fault tree, like we said, the failure mode and effect analysis is also a risk analysis method, basically identifying potential failures before they occur. And remember, risk assessment is a proactive way of finding potential threats that can exploit vulnerabilities. So this is a sample corrective action plan. If you do the 5 W's and the H, is basically what you're saying. There's an action that will be done. There's an actor that will do it. There's a time when they will do it. There's the reason why they're doing it. Yeah, the non-conformity. There's the how they will do it, the process, and there's the where they will do it. Okay, and that is how a corrective action plan is. So when you are reviewing the corrective action plan or doing a follow-up, You're looking at, oh, this is when they said they would do it. This is who they said will do it. Are they trained? Did they do it? How did they do it? Has it eliminated the stuff? Okay, so it is a promise sheet. They promise to do something, and you follow up and check whether they've done it. Yep. And as auditors, you track and monitor the progress of corrective actions. You don't have to wait until the date and set a reminder. Oh, they said they will do it on the 25th. Let me see if they've done that. You can set reminder a month prior to say, right, you said you would do this corrective action. What's the progress? Oh, we're 85% to it. We'll hit our target. By the 25th, we would have completed it. Okay, so you don't have to wait till the end. And we've already said how non-conformities can be identified by document reviews, by physical examination, by observation, by interviews, and various other testing procedures like sampling, technical checks as well. Okay, so that's how you identify non-conformities. And if you remember, non-conformities are basically the situation where requirements are not met. There are requirements, they don't meet it. It's a non-conformity. It will then be down to saying whether they are major, minor, or not. So first you identify non-conformities, then you determine the significance of those non-conformities. How do you do that? You look at the materiality based on the impact on, in this case, security, customer satisfaction, regulatory compliance, legal requirements, organizational objectives. Just comes down that line of requirements. Okay, and then you can categorize them into severity levels. If you are doing external audits, it'll be opportunities for improvement, minor nonconformity, major nonconformity, or conformity. If it's internal audit, it could be minor, major, important, critical. Okay, based on context and scope. So this is the explanation. Like you see, this is for external audits. For external audits, you would have minor, major, conformity, and observation. Minor nonconformities have minimal impact on product quality, on security, on confidentiality, integrity, and availability. I need to correct this one. So we're not doing QMS, we're doing ISMS. So this should be security. It should be security and not product anyway. Information security. And you can even say confidentiality, integrity, and availability, not just safety, not just compliance. So the CRAs can go there as well. So minor nonconformity, it's basically they result in minor deviations from requirements, just minor. So if you've got a clause and they don't fulfill one subclause where there might be A, B, C, D, E, F, and they don't fulfill one or two, look at what effect it has when you in the grand scheme of things. I mean, you're looking at the big picture. Would it be significant? What's the materiality of those two that might be missed? Then you will determine whether it's minor or major. And then major, where they do not fulfill major requirement, like a whole clause is missed, that will be a major nonconformity. But after scoring a finding as minor or major, what will help us ensure that we get it right? What can we do to be sure that our rating or score on an audit finding is correct? What can help us in that assurance? What do you think? What can help you get it right to score?
Sorry, I don't get the question, sir.
So we're auditing, we're a team, and somebody has said, oh, this is a minor non-conformity. How do you know that finding is really a minor non-conformity? What can make you be sure that that scoring is correct? What can you do to be sure?
What you going to
That,
verify? When we talk
sorry?
about it, to verify whether it is not taking it at face value. To actually check
Okay.
what
Okay,
the evidence is that was checked.
it's from quality assurance of audit. Every auditor's work must be peer reviewed. So you have your method, you've planned, and you've come. Now, different auditors are doing their work. The lead auditor must peer review every auditor's work. Oh, and there'll be back and forth comments. Why did you say this is minor? We give the opportunity for the auditor to say, because this is what it says. Then you will now go back to the plan and the scoring table. A minor non-conformity is where, so there'll be that guide here in your audit plan and your audit method. You would then be confirming that they've scored it as agreed. If they've scored an organization major, you are going to check to be sure that that major is truly a major before you go and speak with them. Remember, you go from evidence to finding to conclusion, and it's by peer reviewing that you'll be sure that what's been called a minor is truly a minor. If it's an observation, make sure it's an observation. Sometimes the auditee or the audit client know their stuff, so you have to be ready to defend anything that you would have scored. This is an alternative audit scoring or rating system. So we've looked at one, but you can also do this. In conformity, opportunity for improvement, minor nonconformity, and major nonconformity. If it's in conformity, you just check it at regular audits. There'll be no intervention, no need to check in between because it's in conformity. They adhere. The records are there. The evidence points to them doing what they're supposed to. So there's no need to check. If it matters to the audit next time, that's when you will check. But there's no real need to check it because they're in conformity. Opportunities for improvement is a no or low risk issue that basically there's just opportunity for them to improve. They may be doing it in a way that it can be simplified, but there's no obligation to actually take corrective action. Okay. You would tell the recommendation will be consider implementing improvements and monitor trends because it is showing that maybe a non-conformity can appear in this area. That's why I tell them to improve. Maybe they're not tracking regulation well, but they've not failed now, but because they are not keeping their eye on changing regulation, by the time changes come, this area that you're not looking at, you may fail. Okay. Uh, the the um, basis of saying the tire of a car is not according to law and change. So when you think, oh, my tires are okay, look at the depth. The mechanic will be telling you that, "Hey, do you know the law is changing in September? And if you're not tracking that, you don't have notifications. There's not no way to know it. You can fall foul of the law by September ending. So that's what opportunity for improvement is. Okay, it's not non-conformity now, but by the time the regulation changes, then yeah, the speed limit is being dropped to 65 and you're not keeping your eye open and you drive a lot. Yeah, it's an area or opportunity for improvement. Minor non-conformity will then be medium risk. So if we say opportunity for improvement is no or low risk, minor non-conformity will be medium risk. Okay, it's basically like we said, maybe they miss just some parts of a clause or some requirement, or the control is effective but no documentation. That can also be a minor non-conformity. If documentation there is mandatory, as an example, yeah. So you have to look at what is the significance of it based on context. And then major nonconformity is where a control that based on a risk is high risk. So you remember they have a statement of applicability, which is a list of controls, and you will also look at their risk register. So if a control is tied to a high risk area and it fails, that's a major nonconformity. Or in the light of the standard, they do not fulfill a clause. Yeah, the clause is the whole clause is not fulfilled. The control is not effective and it exposes the business to high risk. That is major nonconformity. How would you mitigate major nonconformity? You would re-audit within 4 weeks, or they would not pass the audit. We've talked about this before.
I have a question, sir.
No problem, Chris.
So, for opportunities for improvement, does it have to be only if it's going right, as in if you're in a worse position and, well, seemingly or supposedly something that is not too good, and if it is left to deteriorate, then it becomes bad? Is that only the position under which you offer opportunities for
No.
improvement?
I don't think I even said that. Remember, I said you may not be tracking something. You are fulfilling the requirement now, but because you are not tracking it, by the time the regulation changes, that's the example I gave, you would then have fallen foul. So opportunity for improvement is, take a look at this as an example. I'll give you a real life situation now. We're auditing an organization. We're auditing 27,001. We're auditing 27,001, 14,001, and 9,001. And part of the opportunity for improvement is, oh, you're saying the same thing in several places. Why don't you integrate 14,001 and 9,001? Because 14,001, even though it's environmental management system, is actually a quality management system for the environment. So the same thing you see in your quality management system, you're saying your EMS. Why don't you combine them? Because based on the documentation you're creating, you might miss something. It might become a non-conformity. So that's an opportunity for improvement. We're not going to score you. We're not going to fail you. It's not a non-conformity, but you can improve it. Okay? And the other example I gave is the one I just gave tonight, that it might be an area where you're not keeping an eye on. By the time the law changes, by the time regulation changes, you may be in, it might become a situation of non-conformity. So why don't you improve it? Okay?
Okay.
Yeah. So we've already talked about corrective action. It's basically the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And in terms of the objective, the why, make it SMART. Okay? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Make them specific. Auditors will just look at that. Oh, you've not said when you will do it. Yeah, it makes sense. Good. And then, of course, the verification and the validation. Meanwhile, for the exam, know the difference between verification and validation. There are two explanations for them. Verification is typically a test by operators or more technical people. Validation is done by more senior people. So verification is done by responsibles. Validation is done by accountables. Okay? When we talk about the difference, when you're differentiating between verification and validation, in more technical terms or technical technology situations, verification is done by the operators, the technical people, and validation is done by the certifiers. Those that will certify and sign off, they validate. Okay? Questions? Any questions on what I just said? Good. So you verify the effectiveness of corrective actions through monitoring, validation. That doesn't read good. Verify the effectiveness of corrective actions through monitoring, validation, and verification process to prevent. Verify the effectiveness of corrective actions through monitoring, validation, and verification processes. Yeah, to prevent recurrence of non-conformities. But I would put that in correct order. Verification always comes before validation, always. Yep. Good. Okay. Now this we'll do it together. We don't have the time for you to go off to a breakout room. So let's do it together. In this question, you are leading, you are leading an audit team conducting an ISMS audit for a manufacturing company. Okay. During the audit, you identify several non-conformities that's related to the production process. Describe the approach you would take to handle the non-conformities, including how you would identify them, how you would assess their significance, and how you would develop corrective actions to address them effectively. So how would you identify non-conformities? How would you identify non-conformities?
So you take a hierarchical approach to the audit criteria, stepping it down from so is there any regulations that describes how production within that area needs to happen? And then
Okay.
from there move on to if there are any standards around it, around that they subscribe to, and any policies that they have of what they have to do. So there's that hierarchical approach, and then and see how that marries up with the requirements of the standards the standard that the ISMS standard.
Yeah,
That would
because
be
it's an
the approach.
ISMS.
Yes, of course, it's an ISMS. So that would be the way to see if there are any non-conformances and how material it is to the audit that you're doing. That would be my approach.
Okay. Now,
Or
you
maybe
remember
how
what
I
we...
would identify them.
No, it's very good. You are on track. I just wanted to remind everyone of what we did when we started. Yeah, Chinyere, you want to go?
I'm wondering this is where the ISO 27002 comes in terms of the details of what to look out for, guidelines for controls, and then linking it back to the I think the audit specification, the objectives would have identified what will constitute a non-conformity and how many minors will lead to one measure. I think these are things that we probably would have agreed. So at
Very
that,
good.
yeah, you have to refer back to that document.
Very good. So what the question is asking is that we describe our approach to handling non-conformities. How we would identify them. How would we know their scale, their significance? The corrective action plans and all that is different. We can all see generically. The aspect that is unique to first, this organization, second, manufacturing company, is the context. So when we started today, we talked about, remember that's why I told you about the PDCA. When you're auditing, what is the context? This manufacturing company, where is it located? This manufacturing company, how many sites do they have? What's their number, the number of staff they have? You also have to look at the context, whether it's the first time you're auditing or not. When they apply, you're saying, oh, who are these people we're auditing? The inherent risk. You should have considered the inherent risk, okay? Because it will then let you know how many auditors you're going with, how long the audit is going to last, where are we going to do the audit? You would have considered that. Then for non-conformities, is basically requirements. Where they do not fulfill them, those will be non-conformities. You're also going to look at the audit criteria. Is it just the standard, or is it policy as well? And like Chris said, law, regulation. How many things are we getting our requirements from? Is it just the ISO 27001, or is there additional audit criteria based on the context? Okay, based on the audit engagement and the scope. And then for the significance, we look at the context again. What is a manufacturing company? What do they subscribe to? The context. What is their legal register showing us? What are they supposed to be complying to? What their risk, their risk appetite, whether they've written out their risk appetite and articulated it in a document or they haven't. Because if there's no requirement anywhere that says they must have a risk appetite documented, then you just have to figure it out. Speak with them. What's the risk appetite? Yeah. If this was financial company, there's a requirement for a risk appetite statement. They must have it. It must be expressed. It must be documented. It must even be approved. But manufacturing might not have that. You then have to assess the significance based on their risk register, their legal register that lists out what they should be compliant to. Oh, because you're a manufacturing company, this is who your regulators are. And then you look at the regulator, what does regulator say? My regulator might say 0 accidents. So you're also going to be looking at safety. By that they must report accidents every week. Have they been doing that? So you're assessing significance. The regulator requires you to do that. If you do not comply to your regulator, we cannot certify you. That's the reason why we look at significance or risk appetite. You cannot be telling them you pass when their regulator is saying this thing is very important to us, and they've not been doing that. Okay. Good. I think we've talked about this. You verify corrective actions and then follow-up audits. Follow-up audits are also referred to as surveillance audits. They are sometimes even called calendar audits because typically they happen every year, every 12 months. They are a recurrent assessment after the initial certification. So the first year you have your initial certification. The second year you have a surveillance audit. The next year you have a surveillance audit. And then where the next year after that second surveillance audit, you have a recertification audit. So there's initial surveillance, recertification. Okay. They are a recurring audit. The scope and focus is less than that of the initial certification. Remember, the initial certification, you look at the plan, you look at the do, and everything else. In the surveillance audit, you don't have to look at everything. You may only look at significant areas, repeated, recurring non-conformities, and other areas of significance. You don't have to look at the whole breadth of the ISMS. Okay, you look at selected clauses. But everything else follows the same method, use the same methodology, use the same test plans, the same test procedures. You look at their corrective actions to see if the corrective action plans have been implemented and any other criteria that's been given them to maintain the certification. Okay. Yeah, so you compare your current findings with previous audits, noting if there have been any changes and whether or not they've addressed non-conformities. In short, you are looking to see that over the period when you have not been there, they have been behaving well. Okay, they have maintained their security posture, they've not exposed themselves, they've not gone to bad habits. Have there been failures? What's the record showing? Oh, in May you did so and so. What corrective actions did you take. Okay. I think that's it. We've done verification, we've done validation. Yep. You establish monitoring mechanisms, and as part of the recurring audit, it's those monitoring mechanisms that you would collect, that you would go for. Yeah, because you are not there. They should have been reporting things. As an example, there are corrective actions that you are supposed to be monitoring. You would have agreed on dates, say milestones. To say when you hit such and such percentage, or every quarter we will call to confirm how you are performing. Or if it's not so significant, you will leave it till 1 full year when you're auditing them. Okay. What marks the close of an audit or the completion of an audit is when everything in the audit plan has been carried out. That's when an audit closes. Okay, when everything in the audit plan, not the schedule, not the program, everything in the audit plan has been done, means the audit is closing, is closed. Okay, and then you do a closing meeting. The closing meeting will be a reflection of the opening meeting. Invite the same key stakeholders, mention the audit objectives to say, this is what we came to do. Yeah, so you're basically saying the same thing that you did during the opening meeting, but confirming that all the objective has been met. Yes, so the certificate decision now. You present your audit findings. We've talked about the presentation, the opportunity for them to either present new evidence or to say, oh, when they're going to close it. If there's any constraint that may have hindered them from presenting it, as an example, top man may not be around, may have not been around when you did the audit, and the executives that were there don't have all the information. Top management might let you know that they are aware, they've drawn up the budget, they've discussed. You would need to give them the opportunity to present those new evidence or better evidence, as the case may be. And then the decision. Don't forget, if they're honest with the action, don't say, oh no, you didn't do it before, I'm not going to change my mind. Just like that. You are there to help them. Okay, so if their actions are genuine and it's going to close the findings, yeah, you can shift the ground. So these are the decision types. When you've done your audit, remember, it can be recommendation with no conditions. That means conformity. This is a reflection of what we saw before. Yeah. So the first one, you are recommending them for certification, no conditions because they're in conformity. Second one, opportunity for improvement. Third will be minor non-conformity, but like I told you, different certification bodies give a score of what would be major. So as an example, in an audit we did, 3 or more minor non-conformities in the same control area or clause is a major non-conformity. Okay, so 3 minor non-conformity in the same clause or control area is a major non-conformity. 3 or more in different control areas is a reason for corrective action or preventive action. You should also consider the impact of the risk by referencing the risk appetite. Yeah, don't forget, you must always say, hey, what's the risk appetite? Oh, manufacturing, the regulator says so and so. So you must always reference the risk appetite. In minor non-conformities, they can be recommended for certification, but the condition will be they must close the corrective action within a specific time. And of course, major non-conformity is the failure to meet the whole control or the whole clause. So there will be no recommendation for certification. Or if it is feasible to close that major non-conformity within 4 weeks, 6 weeks sometimes, depending, then you can still give them conditions. So it could still be the same as the minor non-conformity, where you give them conditions you recommend them for certification based on fulfilling certain conditions. Questions? Any questions?
I think it'd be nice to recap on the last bit you talked about the conditions, even when you offer when you
Recommend.
recommend for certification.
The conditions are just that close the corrective action. That major nonconformity, you remember for every nonconformity, they must create corrective action. The condition is when they fulfill the corrective action, you remember you will do follow-up or they will call. You either come back to verify and validate, or you rely on the internal auditor letting you know that it's been done, because they are staking their license, they're staking their professional integrity by saying, oh, it's been done. If it's not been done and they say it's been done, it's down to them. So as a certification auditor, you can rely on that. So that condition is closing the corrective action within a specified time. That's the CA we're saying. That's just the condition.
So what would be the recommended time to have that corrective action implemented?
It'll be 4 weeks. We said it before, didn't we?
No, if you're recommending for certification, they need to have closed the corrective action within 4 weeks. Or
If it's
implemented the
feasible,
correct. Yeah.
it can be more than that. It
Okay.
can be more than, well, it's down to the certification body that you are auditing, because this is external audit that we're talking about.
Yeah.
The certification body will let you know what that time is, and you would have said it in the opening meeting. So when
Right.
you're saying it here now, it will not be a surprise. This is one of the things you'll be telling them in the opening meeting, that this is what decisions could occur. This is what minor nonconformity means. This is what major nonconformity means. If we find things like this, this is what we could do. You could close it. As an example, if the major nonconformity would require budget approval, and that budget is significant, they cannot do it in 6 months. The board will have to sit, they will have to make so and so profit. Yeah, they will need to employ a DPO. The DPO will need to be interviewed. It's not something they can do within things like that.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
A question, please.
Yes, Alan.
Yeah. So when you have done your first meeting and the plan things does not go as you planned it, and or maybe one of the auditors is not available and you've planned all of this, how do you handle things like that?
Okay, we covered that yesterday, but let me
So
recap. No,
sorry.
no, no, you were not there. Inherent risk. We talk about inherent risk. We talk about control risk, and we talked about detection risk. The inherent risk makes you create an audit plan, and then you put, just like the organization does a risk assessment and puts control in place, auditors need to do a risk assessment as well along those 3 lines. The inherent risk says, okay, let's select auditors based on who we're going to audit. We've just looked at manufacturing. Let's pick auditors that know how to audit manufacturing companies. UK manufacturing companies, for that matter, they are multi-site. They have 10 sites. So how many auditors will we have? So it's down to the lead auditor to plan it. Oh, we're going to need 10 auditors, 2 per site. And if one is unavailable down to sickness, or there's a riot in their own area, you have that plan. There are some people on standby, just like a football match. You have people on the bench. You can also do, if you're Chelsea, you can buy 60 players. Yeah. So
And then offload them gradually.
sorry, yeah, offload them gradually. So you plan, and that's where it comes to experience. Oh, I audited Accenture, I audited Shell. It was a bad experience. We were not expecting that auditors will drop. And that's why it is based on experience. Who has handled challenges? Even in interviews, they ask you, what challenges have you faced? How did you overcome it? Okay. So you would have plan it and make sure your plan is flexible to, so in your risk assessment, you say, oh, what if we need more time in the audit? We'll discuss, we'll ask for more time. We'll discuss with top management. We'll talk with the certification body. You are planning all this. What if resources are not adequate? That's typical risk assessment. We will employ contractors. We will call on auxiliary auditors, those that are on the bench. Oh, this person is almost finishing, or just in case, we have taken 10. We'll use one person, or we will ask that audit, that's part be suspended, or we'll beg, not beg, because there's no begging in professional work. We'll ask politely one site that we're auditing to halt the audit so that we attend to that one that is more significant and the auditors are not there. So we'll take auditors from another site. You would have done that risk assessment. Okay, and you can discuss it with them, or just show it approved, make sure it's approved within the certification body and that the audit team is also aware. You don't have to tell every auditor, but sometimes when they know, oh, so if I don't come on Tuesday, they can bring someone else. Let me go and watch that Arsenal match on Tuesday.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. So you do a risk assessment and you put mitigations there to say, oh, if this risk, of course, there are known risks, but there are also risks that appear that you don't plan for. So do your risk assessment to handle potential risks and do it for handling the known unknowns, those risks that might come and you don't know. The more you engage with others, the more your risk assessment is very comprehensive. So if you allow other people contribute, because we've been talking, but nobody has talked about what if auditors are not there. Well, you see, because our team is made up of a variety of people, skills, strength areas, and all that. As a matter of fact, one thing that should happen, one of the risk assessment things that should happen for, audit, is to do a SWOT on every auditor. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What's the opportunity for them? What's the threat? Oh, this person has just had has just moved house. Moving house and make them disoriented. Oh, this person has just suffered blah, blah, blah. So you need to do a SWOT for every auditor. Yeah. We've already talked about the communication of the results. You conduct a closing meeting. We said the closing meeting should be a reflection of the opening meeting. Hopefully you do the meeting in the same meeting room or as agreed. It could be in a different one, but you make sure it's as agreed. Okay. Invite the same people that you invited in the opening meeting. Recap the audit process, your audit methodology, the scoring, give them an opportunity to ask questions and other kinds of things. And then you congratulate them if they've passed. Yes. So
Okay. Sorry,
that's it.
just a quick one before you go. Before you congratulate them,
Yeah.
what set the criteria for before you can say they passed? Is it the issuing authority before you can say okay they've passed the audits and they could be issued a certificate? What are the criteria? I mean, what are some of the conformities that they are supposed to have before they could say okay they're doing well and they could be issued a certificate?
We already said that the decision table here recommended for certification with no conditions. If they fulfill all requirements, you're recommending them. If they have 3 or more minor nonconformities, it's one major, you don't recommend them for certification.
Okay.
Or you recommend them with condition. But one major, they cannot be certified. There has to be either condition. Yes, you just can't say you're certified with just one major.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Any more questions?
How do you handle bad news now? How do you handle bad news?
Yeah, you don't handle bad news. How do you, as an auditor or as an auditee?
As an auditor, how do you give bad news?
You don't give bad news. There are no bad news. There's just facts. And you should
If
have
you
been
don't, if you don't pass,
telling them.
nothing happen.
You remember you've told them what would constitute major non-conformity from the start. And during the day, during the audit, you would have been communicating to them, oh, this is the finding, and you're giving them opportunity. So at the end of the day, there's no surprises.
Yeah,
It's for their own good and it's for the other stakeholders as well. You cannot tell them, oh, you're certified when you can't tell somebody, oh, here, you've passed an exam if you haven't passed. You get the opportunity to go and fix it. It's not the end of the world. Yeah. You are professional. You almost convey that message in a professional manner. You've got the opportunity to fix it. You are aiding them. Do this correction, we'll certify you. There's nothing there. They too should be open to doing well to get their certification and not cutting corners. In every way you can. Oh no, you have to do this documentation. Oh no, you cannot leave this open. You are helping them. The requirement says so and so. You have to. Yeah, if you don't fulfill it here, you will not get certified. You're telling them all that. So those are the kind of training you can give, letting them know that you cannot be explicit in your training because you cannot, I mean, you have to maintain professionalism, but then you cannot pass them if they haven't passed. Okay. I've advertised this GRC masterclass is the next logical step for those who want to take their career to the next level. Some have signed up. Congratulations to you. I've told you also, I've communicated to you that we've signed our first company that we'll be doing hands-on experience with, and they have got an ISO 27001 project. We're trying to sign another one that has a SOC 2 project. Hopefully we can get it across. But two others have said it's too close for them. So we're going to put them in the next GRC class. But the ISO 27001 class is going on. Okay, so those of you who will be in the class, congratulations to you. There's a lot that will come out of this GRC. When we send you your resources, we're going to ask you for permission for testimonials because this has become, it has turned into our premier course and we want to really sell it. So we're going to do video testimonials or written testimonials and so many things. We are guaranteeing everyone that is out of job will get a job from this course. Okay, it's our premier course, that's why. We're signing partnerships with universities as well and recruitment agencies. So we want to really do well with this. Anyway, send me your preferred dates for exams. It can be anytime, but the next date is the 31st. After that, you tell me when you want to do your exam and I'll confirm to you if it's feasible or not. It's going to be online, and then after that, you get your certificate. We've also been approved by the CPD group as a approved training organization, and we are approving a number of our courses. So many of our courses will also now be accredited, not just the GRC one. Well done, and thank you once again.
I have a question regarding what should we expect for the exams, seeing as you said it's online. How would it run?
Very good. It will be, let me see if I can find sample. Let me find sample questions to show you and maybe even share with you. But it's like the next exam is the 31st of August, and it will run from 7 to 9. Let me stop the recording.